Welcome, everybody, to another episode of 10 Things I Like here on the SevereMMA YouTube page. I am your host, Spencer Kyte, your friendly neighborhood Spencer man, and we are here today to talk about UFC 287. Takes place this weekend, Saturday, April 8th, at Miami-Dade Arena in Miami, Florida, headlined by a middleweight championship rematch between Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya. It has a bunch of fights on this card that I like, a bunch of opportunities to check in with some fighters that I'm excited about, that I'm intrigued by, that I want to see more from. So we're going to dive right in. Item number one, this main event championship rematch. As I said yesterday on one question, I'm not always a fan of immediate rematches. I like the idea of the champion or the former champion going away and getting a win or two, and the new champion having to defend the title against someone else once, maybe twice, depending on the length of the reign of the deposed champion. But this one makes complete sense. Izzy had dominated this division for a number of years. The fight was entirely in his favor, or largely in his favor, prior to the finish. And then there's the history between them, right? And that, for me, is the real part that makes this tantalizing. Because across two sports, Alex Pereira is 3-0 against Izzy. And there's just something about them doing it again, and Izzy getting close last time, that feels like, man, it draws me to this fight because I want to see if he can clear this hurdle. I talked to him on Monday for a piece that is going to be running on the UFC website later this week, or might be up by the time you see this. Please go check that out. Go to my timeline on Twitter. I'll tweet it out if it's there. And he's always done, he did a great job. We talked about it, right? Do you compartmentalize it? Do you set it behind you? He said, yeah, of course, the past is the past. I can't do anything about it. Got to focus on the future. Got to focus on the present, with an eye towards the future. And the present is beating Alex Pereira on Saturday, but it's one of those things that is just, every time these guys step in, the specter of their history hangs over the situation, right? So coming into their fight in November at Madison Square Garden, Izzy again said all the right things. That was kickboxing. This is MMA. Yeah, he beat me there. I can't do anything about it. I've seen it. I've processed it. But now you're coming to my realm. And Pereira went out and beat him again. And so now that it's across two sports, now that it's in the realm that Izzy was dominating, is there that little bit of question? Is that little bit of doubt creep in at some point? I think we're going to see a fairly similar fight to what we saw at Madison Square Garden at UFC 281. And it just is such a captivating idea to see these guys in there again for potentially another 25 minutes, where if Izzy wins, we could very well just say, let's do 3 straight. Let's do 3 in a row, because we're 1-1 here. I'm fascinated. I can't wait for this fight. It's so intriguing to me. Item number 2, another Gilbert Burns appearance. We said on the preview show, and I said in the week leading up to his last fight against Neil Magny, that it felt like Gilbert Burns was primed to make a statement, and he went out and did so. Dominated Neil Magny, got the submission, got the finish, looked great. Gets this opportunity here on Saturday against Jorge Masvidal, a fight he had been chasing, a fight he had been looking for. He gets to come to Masvidal's backyard while still being in Florida, where he lives and trains at Kill Cliff, and gets another chance to just post another big win. And I know that I asked yesterday if Masvidal is still a guy to people, and he's not to me. And so I don't mean a big win in the sense of, oh, this is a critical victory for Gilbert Burns to move him into contention or things like that. I mean a big win in a sense of a chance to go and make another statement against the guy that has a name that people know, that is splashed all over the posters, all over the marquee, all over Embedded this week, because it is in his city, and sort of remind everybody, further solidify his standing as that guy maybe just behind Colby Covington in terms of contenders in this division. It was a good thing for Gilbert Burns that Leon Edwards retained his title in London last month, because that gives him sort of new life in the title picture, right? He doesn't have a history with Edwards. He had already faced and lost to Kamaru Usman, though you could make a case with enough wins, maybe 3-4 victories, Gilbert Burns should get another chance, because he did have Usman on skates and in a bad way early in that fight before getting stopped himself. And so he feels like a guy to me that is really settled into himself, his style of fighting, the way he wants to conduct himself in the cage. And I'm always interested in seeing that. I'm always interested in seeing high-level athletes that have figured out what they want to do, who they want to be, how they want to deploy their considerable tools each and every time they get in there. I think this is another statement fight. I think this is another really show people opportunity for Durinho, and I'm looking forward to it. Item number 3, an absolutely perfect bantamweight pairing between Rob Font and Adrian Yanez. So Rob Font comes in on a 2-fight skid, lost to Marlon Moraes last year, just over a year ago, and Jose Aldo before that. Adrian Yanez comes in having won all 5 of his UFC appearances, first round stoppage over Tony Kelly in his most recent outing, bonuses in all 5 fights, only gone the distance once, that was against Davey Grant. And this is 2 guys meeting at sort of a crossroads, at sort of a proper intersection. Rob Font needs to prove and show that he is still a top 10 guy, that those losses are to superior competition at the time, or quality competition in terms of guys that were ranked and in that top 15 in that upper echelon. Cheeto, of course, has went on, won a couple more fights, got himself into a position where he fought Corey Sandhagen a couple weeks ago. Jose Aldo is Jose Aldo, and also put himself in a spot where he fought Merab Dvalishvili last year when he could have even been fighting for a title, subsequently retired, but fine. And Yanez needs this step up. He needs to face a guy like Rob Font that is tenured, that is seasoned, that has all the tricks of the trade, that knows who he is as an athlete, that has an abundance of weapons and a style, frankly, that can present challenges for Adrian Yanez, who likes to be in the pocket and throw hands and isn't afraid to get into back and forth situations. But that might be a mistake against a guy like Rob Font. That's the stuff that we're going to find out. That's the stuff that I'm looking forward to seeing. It may be a mistake for Rob Font as well. Adrian Yanez hits really hard. He's a good boxer. He's got crisp shots. He's got some power. We saw in the fight with Chito Vera that for all the volume Rob Font threw, the power is what decided things. And so this feels like it could be maybe a little mini version of that fight. It could be the veteran shows the ascending 29-year-old that he's not yet ready for this, not yet ready to sit at the big kid table as we get ready for Easter here, or at the grown-up table. He's got to stay at the kiddie table as we get ready for Easter this weekend. I hope all of you that are celebrating have a lovely time. We will be having a meal here on Friday. But maybe it is the opportunity where Adrian Yanez says, no, this is where I go. And he continues to go forward. We just don't know. And as you know from following me and listening to me and watching me, I love these kinds of fights. I love these opportunities when we find out things about ascending talents, but also about tenured guys that are in a position where they need to show us a little something. Can't wait for this one. Going to be great. Item number 4. It's prove it time for Kevin Holland. So, Kevin Holland, one of those guys, I've been very honest about it throughout the last couple of years, throughout his rise. Somebody that I've always felt like I've seen through. I've always felt that I've recognized the real Kevin Holland, or where he really fits in these divisions, and I haven't been fooled by 5-fight winning streaks over a couple short notice replacement opponents and an aging Jacare before he lost those 2 fights to Derek Brunson and Marvin Vettori. I wasn't fooled when he moved to middleweight and got 2 submission wins over mid-pack guys and then lost to better competition. And so I'm really curious to see what we get on Saturday against Santiago Ponzinibbio, because we know that the Argentine Dagger is going to be locked in from the jump, is a dangerous, tough out, a guy that has been in the rankings, that was on the cusp of title contention before he missed 2 years with a series of injuries and illnesses that almost cost him his career. He hasn't been able to get all the way back there yet, but he's shown that he's still a dangerous, formidable guy in the welterweight division. Great come from behind win over Alex Morono last time out. And so for Kevin Holland, this is where you sort of like, to me, he's in a position where we're constantly redrawing the line with Kevin Holland. We're constantly sort of resetting where he stands. So you throw out the Khamzat Chimaev fight because it is what it is. Short notice, up a division, all this stuff. It's Chimaev. He's great. Always going to beat Kevin Holland. But the loss to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson moves that line back a little bit. And listen, I say this as somebody that loves Stephen Thompson. I tweeted out on Tuesday, if the UFC is bringing Wonderboy north of the border, I'm probably going to have to go to see my guy fight. And so I say it with respect for Wonderboy. But losing to this version of Wonderboy, this age level of Wonderboy, isn't the same as losing to contender Wonderboy. And you can say injury, you can say all of these different things. It's still a loss. And so we reset that standing. We reset that measure. Now he faces Santiago Ponzinibbio, and a loss here or a win here gives us another opportunity to figure out sort of where he stands. I maintain that he is not a top 15 guy. Not that he can't be, but that he isn't now and probably won't be long-term, because I don't think he really wants to do the things that I think you need to do in order to hold on to one of those positions. I think he's a little unserious. I think he's a little unfocused. I think he's more interested in being an entertainer and a performer, which kudos to him, respect to him, but it's not going to get you where you want to go professionally. And so we'll find out. We'll find out a little more. We'll see where that line gets drawn after Saturday. Item 5, Raul Rojas Jr. returns. Listen, this is the most fascinating fighter on the UFC roster to me right now, going forward, probably for the next several years until we see sort of that ceiling set. And I don't think we're actually going to be able to really truly say and declare where his ceiling rests, probably even beyond the cutoff date for the John Jones record that he, like every other young fighter, is targeting, because he's 18 years old. And so 5 years from now is his window for the record, but then he's still only 23. And we don't see these athletes really come into their own and really develop into who they truly are until they're 27, 28, 29, 30 years old, right? Brandon Moreno and Alexa Grasso, the only champions we have right now that are under the age of 30, and they're both 29. They both turn 30 in the next 12 months. And so to look at Rojas as this moldable pile of clay with great upside, tons of room to grow, tons of opportunity, just captivated by him every time he steps into the cage. Now, some of that may wane if we get a string of losses, if we see a bunch of struggle and it becomes apparent that this kid isn't ready to be here yet, truly, legitimately ready to be here yet. He looked great against Jay Perrin. That's a good first win. This fight on Saturday against Christian Rodriguez, to me, is a really challenging test for a sophomore showing for an 18-year-old kid. Christian Rodriguez is a very good fighter who comes from a good camp, who has solid experience, unbeaten in this division, matches up well with Raul Rojas Jr. And so this is the first time, to me, we're going to get a real sense of, okay, where is this kid at in his progression, in his development, in terms of what we can expect from him over the next 12 to 18 months. If he looks great, if he goes out and shows out against C-Rod on Saturday, gets another first round win, gets another stoppage at some point along the way, even just gets a dominant victory, that means something. That says something. That resonates. And he'll get another little step up in competition. I don't think there's any reason to rush him, but he'll get another little step up in competition against maybe a, little bit more seasoned veteran guy that's had 4, 5, 6 fights in the UFC. If he loses, it's fine. We just reset. This is where he's at. We stay right here. We get him these fights. We get him this experience. We take our time. We wait and see. But he's just, I mean, he's the guy that I am honed in on for the next several years. And there's going to come a point, it's still fresh and intriguing to everybody right now, right? He's making his sophomore appearance. There's still that push from the promotion. We're seeing a lot of Raul Rojas Jr. love from the UFC right now. There's going to come a time in the next couple of years where that gets muted a little bit, where that dies down because someone else comes along. He's probably going to lose a fight at some point, and it's not just going to be all rise. But I am on board. I am locked in for this ride for as long as it takes, and until I reach a point where I'm like, okay, I know who he is. I know where he's going. I know where the ceiling is. I'm good. But that might be, quite frankly, quite truly, 10 years from now. I'm invested. You should be too. Item number 6, critical middleweight pairing between Kelvin Gastelum and Chris Curtis. This is one of those fights that it's not necessarily going to do anything about the title picture. It's not going to do anything about even really the top 10 in the division, because I think both are currently stationed outside of the top 10. But it's a really important fight. Kelvin Gastelum comes in on a 2-fight losing streak. He's 1-5 in his last 6 and just hasn't looked right. Hasn't looked truly competitive to me in a while, probably since that fight with Israel Adesanya for the interim title several years ago that started this 6-fight slide. 5-fight slide. One, and you know what I mean. Some of it is age, some of it is injuries, some of it is just damage over the course of years and years and years of fighting. Remember, he's been in the UFC now for just about a decade. That stuff all takes its toll. I think weight cutting and all of that stuff takes its toll. But it's also important and critical for Chris Curtis, who has done really well overall in totality since coming into the UFC, but hasn't been able to take that full step forward up into the top 10. Right? He got that opportunity, took a fight with Jack Hermanson, and it didn't go his way. And that sort of sets him back. This is another chance to beat a guy that's fought for UFC gold, fight a guy that's really well respected, recognizable name, probably the biggest name that he's faced thus far, even if Jack Hermanson was in a better overall position and ranking and things like that. And so, look, we talk about middleweight all the time, and I don't necessarily think that Kelvin Gastelum adds anything new to the upper tiers of this division if he's able to dial it back and, fountain of youth and start a run here. Chris Curtis could be interesting. He doesn't have a history with anybody that's in that upper tier. He would probably avoid a fight with Sean Strickland because they're close friends and training partners. But outside of that, he is a new name against all of these guys that are ahead of him. And if he goes out and has a great performance against Kelvin Gastelum at UFC 287, it puts him in a position where the second half of the year can be another big opportunity, can be another big fight, can be a point where he gets to jump on the microphone to close out the prelims and call his shot. He may not get who he calls for, but he'll get an opportunity against somebody with a number next to their name, with a single digit next to their name, I would imagine. And that makes this important, makes it worth watching, makes it worth tuning in for. Item number 7, a big opportunity for Luana Pinheiro. She returns for her 3rd UFC appearance. She hasn't fought in well over a year because she blew out her knee last year. She takes on Michelle Waterson Gomez on the prelims. It's her first opportunity to face a ranked fighter in the strawweight division. She herself has crept into the bottom third of the rankings simply because there is a bit of a dearth of talent in the division right now. Lots of talent up at the top end, maybe even through the top 10. But then in that lower third of the top 15, it gets a little sketchy. And outside of that, it's a lot of unproven talent. But this is a chance for Pinheiro to face a tenured veteran, a respected name, an established name in Michelle Waterson, who has headlined events, who has been pushed as a potential contender. And if she's able to go out there and get a good win, even if it's a decision, even if it's 29-28, you go out and beat Michelle Waterson, that still means something. That still resonates. And people will want to do the pull away from it and detract from it and say, well, she's 37 and this is now 3 straight losses and all of those different things. but it's a big win. It's a good win for a young fighter who is 29, who is trying to work her way forward, who's coming back off some time on the shelf. If you can come back off a year away and beat Michelle Waterson Gomez, that means something. That resonates. And so for me, as somebody that was interested in Luana Pinheiro from the time she got her win on the Contender Series all the way through up to here, I'm invested. I'm in. I want to see this. These are the things I talk about all the time, right? Are these opportunities for these young ascending talents that don't have a history in these divisions against these opponents that we all know, against these fighters that have been around forever. We want to see fresh names. We want to see new fighters moving up the ranks. Here's the opportunity. Here's the chance. Here's an example of that. Sit down, tune in, see what Lu Pinheiro can do on Saturday. Should be a great fight. Item number 8, a good test for Joe Pyfer. I really don't know where Joe Pyfer fits in the middleweight division, but Saturday's fight with Gerald Meerschaert is going to give me a much better understanding. So Pyfer is 26 years old. He's 10-2 overall, but one of those losses, he dislocated his elbow in his first appearance on the Contender Series against Dustin Stoltzfus. And so we kind of just asterisk that one. Like, injuries happen and it certainly counts as a loss, but like, it's hard to hold it against him, right? He tried to brace when he's getting thrown to the ground and his elbow just, got a good win in his debut in terms of like the performance itself, right? In terms of the actual, what it says on paper of a first round finish, but it was against Alan Amedovski, which is an absolute layup. It is a go out and get a victory in your debut guy that we put some momentum behind, guy that we put some energy behind after Dana cut the B. Joe Pyfer promo at the end of the first episode of the Contender Series last year. But GM3 is no joke, man. I said all of this yesterday. You go out and you beat Gerald Meerschaert, who's got 50 fights under his belt and 35 wins and upwards of 25 submission wins at that, and has shown in a bunch of these fights that you could beat the holy hell out of him early and he'll stay in there and he'll come back and get after it. You got to be careful against Gerald Meerschaert. You got to mind your P's and Q's. You can't leave your neck exposed for a minute. You can't leave an arm out. You got to put him away. He is like one of these zombies on The Walking Dead, I would imagine. I haven't ever watched an episode. Don't hold it against me. You got to kill this dude dead in order to get a victory and feel safe against GM3. And so for a kid like Pyfer that is 26, as I said, and just getting started, this is one of those ones. It doesn't determine absolutely what his upside is, but it tells us about right now, right? It tells us whether we should be really excited about him as a young fighter in the middleweight division where we need young fighters scaling the ranks and moving forward, as we just sort of talked about a little bit with Gastelum and Curtis. Or is he a guy that still needs a couple of years of seasoning and is going to be stuck fighting guys in the lower half of the division and needs to be facing those guys for right now to build that experience, to sharpen the skills, to tighten up some of the things that are a little bit shaky still? We're going to find out. I love these kinds of fights, right? This is the veteran test Harry and I talk about all the time. I love it. Can't wait. Item number 9, a measuring stick moment for Lupi Godinez. So she welcomes Cynthia Calvillo back to the 115-pound weight class. Calvillo had been up at flyweight for the last 5 fights, won the first one against Jessica Ai, lost the last 4, most recently, I believe, against Nina Nunes. And it's one of those situations for Godinez where she gets in there with an experienced veteran again, after having lost to a pair of experienced veterans in Jessica Panay and Angela Hill, though I still think she won the Jessica Panay fight, but so be it. And we get to see what kind of development there's been since that fight last summer against Angie Hill, how she's able to deploy her strengths, which are primarily the grappling, but she does have a little bit of pop in her hands and she's willing to throw against someone similar, right? Cynthia Calvillo at her core is a grappler. She will throw hands, but she's looking to get this to the mat, to use her strength, to use her physicality. And so I just want to see where Godinez is at in her progression. She's somebody that came to the sport a little bit later, not super late, but she's 29, but still doesn't have a whole ton of experience. She's fought good competition throughout. Now she's getting into that point where she's going to be facing real quality competition, tenured fighters, experienced fighters, or other ascending talents like her. And so we get a chance just to see where that progression is at. She's been in the UFC for a minute now. She's got a bunch of fights under her belt, got 6 fights under her belt, faced some good competition, faced some ranked opponents. Let's see what she can do, getting a chance to face somebody that's on a bit of a slide, that maybe is still having a bit of a crisis of confidence, and can go out there and just kind of hit reset, start the year with a win, and get things moving forward. I still think she is a top 15 fighter. I think she has the ability and the upside to make it into the top 10, if not further, because of the physicality she brings, because of the wrestling she has, because of the power that we've seen from her and the strength we've seen from her. But she's got to get a win here on Saturday. So we'll see. Last one, item number 10, Jacqueline Amorim debuts. Anytime you give me someone that is undefeated with a string of first round finishes coming into the UFC, I'm going to pay attention. And then when you tie in that person had a great deal of success in the IBJJF, I don't know why that's always hard for me to say. I stumble over it every single time. World Championships and no-gi, both through her belt progression and then again at black belt, and has competed in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competitions and done well. I want to pay attention. I want to see. I talked yesterday about the strength of schedule or lack thereof that she has faced. The women that she has beaten, only one of them has continued to fight or earn a victory or made an appearance since they fought, and that was a loss. That's not necessarily a great sign, but she's not getting thrown in too deep here. She faces Sam Hughes on Saturday. I like Sam Hughes. She's a good talent. She's done reasonably well after a rocky start in the UFC. She lost last time out to Piera Rodriguez, who fights next week in Kansas City and is somebody to keep an eye on. But this is a good initial foray into the octagon for Amorim. Again, all first round finishes, but we don't know how legit that is, how real that is. I have questions, as I said yesterday, about BJJ specialists coming into this sport because we haven't really seen them succeed and thrive and dominate the way that they did in early days when it was still new to everybody, or even now when they don't necessarily have the base wrestling to go with it. I think there's room for someone like Amorim to have success in the strawweight division because the women's ranks are a little bit behind the male counterparts in terms of the wrestling and the grappling and the defense and all of those things. But this should be a good measuring stick right out of the gate. A tough fight, a good debut. It's a big card. There's going to be a lot around this, right? This is, now you're on the big stage. She competed in LFA and won their title last time out. And so that's as good as you can do on the regional circuit in terms of quality of show, the production, the whole nine, being around it. But debuting on a UFC pay-per-view is a different ball game. It's a different spectacle. You're going into a great big 20,000 seat arena. We'll see. I'm curious. I'm interested to see what happens. It should be a good way to open the card. Should be a great fight card on Saturday at Miami-Dade Arena, UFC 287. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you are a little bit more now after you've gotten through this. Thank you for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with Ian O'Neill for the Severe Picks and Plays. The preview show will be up and running and in your life on this channel as well, so go check that out. And then Harry and I will see you on Tuesday for the takeaways, looking back at everything that transpires on Saturday at UFC 287. Until then, know that you are loved, know that you are appreciated. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.